Hello and welcome to Backyard Catch. This is your host, Nick Roby. I'm here with our special guest, Mr. Will Harper. How are you doing today, Will?
Doing good. How about you, Nick?
I'm good. It's good to jump in. We have our also our podcast sponsor, Oliver, who's hanging out with us.
Yes, if you hear some pitter-patter of paws and maybe an occasional bark, we do apologize in advance. He kind of does his own thing. So he may be around and pitter-pattering throughout the podcast. So.
Right. He's very supportive.
Yes, he loves sports too.
So Will has kindly agreed to jump in and join in on Backyard Catch. And so Will, I thought it might be good just for listeners to get a little background of you. Where did your love for sports start? Like, what was your first memories of that? How'd you, what do you remember as a kid growing up with sports?
Yeah. So growing up, I played t-ball, which led to baseball. I played basketball, played football, played 1 year of soccer. Hated it, although I've grown to appreciate soccer as an adult and
Sure,
watching
yeah.
it. But yeah, I played all kinds of sports growing up. Both my parents love sports. My dad's family are all South Carolina Gamecock fans. Most of them went there. My mom's family are all North Carolina Tar Heel fans. None of them went there, but my granddad was a fan and just passed it through. So I kind of grew up in a split household, half South Carolina, half North Carolina. So
yeah. Well, what's the true Carolina then? If you're on both sides of it, when you say Carolina, like who?
When I say Carolina, it depends what month of the year it is.
Okay.
So right now in January, in my mind, I'm thinking North Carolina. But yeah, I would say overall, since I am a South Carolina alum, South Carolina is the true Carolina. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening. But yeah, so South Carolina, North Carolina fan. Professionally, I'm kind of a homer. I like all the local teams. So the Panthers, I've only ever known the Panthers. I was born in '90, so I know they came in '95. But
Right.
I don't remember the NFL pre-Panthers. So I've always liked the Panthers. The Braves, I'm a huge Braves fan. The Braves are probably my favorite team of all teams across sports. So I love the Braves. The Hornets, even though we're not very good, I do like the Hornets. A couple of my favorite players growing up, my first player that I loved individually was John Elway.
Okay.
Yeah, so I love John Elway, had his jersey as a 7-year-old kid. Loved Michael Jordan growing up, even though he was with the Bulls, and that was before I really knew about the Hornets and Bulls and everything.
Sure.
I just love Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And then of course Chipper Jones.
Right.
So if you're a kid growing up in the South that's a Braves fan, then you have no choice but to love Chipper Jones.
Right. Yeah. I mean, switch hitter, you can like play everything, and it was awesome.
Yeah. Arguably the greatest third baseman of all time.
Yeah, it is true. I mean, he's definitely up there with the switch hitters. I mean, it's pretty much him, Mickey Mantle, Eddie Murray.
Oh, yeah.
From back in the day with the Orioles. I mean, that's pretty up there. And he'll be in the Hall of Fame too. It's pretty crazy to think about how many like Hall of Famers will end up being on those Braves teams.
Oh yeah,
because you've already got what? You've got Glavine,
and Chipper
Maddox.
Actually got introduced last year, so he's in there now.
He's in there now. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz. So all 3 starters on one team.
3 starters on one team.
Hall of Famers,
Yeah.
And then Chipper's Chipper's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had a lot of talent. It's kind of a shame we only have one championship to show for it, but
I know
we're on the comeback. We've got some young talent, which hopefully we can talk about some other time, maybe as baseball season gets closer.
Yeah,
but yeah, we're looking good for this year.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. So yeah, we're gonna jump in and kind of go from there. We thought it'd be fun to jump in and talk about just kind of a little side note from aftermath of the college football season, with Clemson winning the title, and now there's a lot of just transfer. Everything just kind of goes down like right after the season officially ends, and now we have the official transfer portal that has been introduced this year.
Great name, by the way.
Great name, by the way. So maybe for people who don't know what that is, what's kind of the process been kind of looking like as players are trying to figure out what they're doing, if they're staying on their team or not?
So what the transfer portal is I've heard it described as the college football waiver wire. So essentially it's a database where any player looking to transfer can enter into the transfer portal. And essentially it's a way for all other teams to know, hey, this player is available and wants to transfer.
Right.
So it essentially opens up a second recruiting of this player.
Sure.
I don't know why they call it the transfer portal.
Yeah,
I was thinking the transfer. I can't think of anything right this second, but anything's better than portal, pretty much.
Yeah, I think in soccer it's even called the transfer window, or like they have that whole system over there. But
Right.
portal makes it seem like they're going into like another dimension or something. They get to like re-choose their team.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that's gone down. I mean, obviously early as a Clemson Tiger fan, I was hearing about all your Kelly Bryant and ended up deciding to use and left the team after the year, and now he's transferring. But I was even then when they were talking about it, they even used portal. It was like since then. And now he, as some of you might know, is now with Missouri, which will be interesting to see how that kind of flows. As they were with their quarterback before, they were more of a Drew Lock. They were more of a gunslinging kind of an offense with him, his arm, and with Bryant more being a running quarterback. That's going to be interesting to see. I'm not sure how that will all flow, but
yeah. So as a South Carolina grad and fan, we play Missouri every year in the SEC East because, again, Missouri in the East makes perfect sense.
Right. I mean, the farthest west team makes perfect sense in the East Coast.
So I've seen Missouri every year since they joined the SEC, and they have talent at running back, which I think is going to help Kelly a lot.
Okay.
I think we're going to see a lot of RPOs, a lot of option plays where Kelly can use his legs, which is his best quality.
Right. I mean, that's him being a dual threat, I think, makes him more of a better, because he can throw. He's just not the best at. So as a Clemson Tiger fan, just noticing the difference between the two, it wasn't that Kelly wasn't a good quarterback. It seemed more that his just specialty was running and then being able to throw when guys were open, versus Trevor being able to throw and anticipate more of those throws, as we've seen, and then using his legs as kind of an off speed, kind of the difference. It's all interesting to see. So now we have the whole transfer portal, and now it seems like a bunch of players have just been signed to jump and switch. And so the biggest ones are probably like Tate Martell is now leaving Ohio State, and we have the backup QB from Oklahoma. Forgetting his name for a second. He's put his name in as well, and then Justin Fields is probably the biggest one. Mm-hmm. So, Will, with all that's going down, I mean, what do you think? Just as an SEC guy, seeing Fields go from, a big rival in Georgia now going to Ohio State, how's that all gone down from your perspective?
I'm happy to see him leave.
That's fair.
We got stomped by Georgia this year, and it's probably not going to be pretty next year either, whenever we have to travel to Georgia. But he didn't play against us this year. Fromm played the whole game.
He played the whole game.
And the last we saw of Justin Fields was the epic, terrible fake punt call in the SEC championship game.
Right.
But he's uber talented. Mm-hmm. He and Lawrence were the top two prospects coming out of high school last year for a reason. We've seen Lawrence and what he can do. Fields is a Cam Newton clone, I would say.
Yeah.
He was just behind Fromm. Right. Yeah. Just behind Fromm at Georgia. So I, for one, am happy to see him leave. Mm-hmm. He's not going to beat us unless we make the playoff, which I don't see happening, but go Cox. I think for him, I mean, it was a smart move because Fromm's established. Fromm's good. Fromm's not going to hurt Georgia. He's not going to make turnovers. He's not going to make bad decisions. He's going to take care of the ball, let his playmakers make plays, and go about his business that way. So, for Fields, I think it was a good idea. Now, the more interesting thing for me as an SEC guy is what's Jalen Hurts going to do.
Sure, yeah.
Because he is also in the transfer portal. Tua has established that job at Alabama, even though he didn't play great in the championship.
I mean, they're not going to replace
Hurts.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
So, I think it is interesting because I think that was a very mature move of him to stay. Mm-hmm. And not go. I think it's very easy to compare the Kelly Bryant situation at Clemson and the Jalen Hurts situation because Kelly, this was his last year. And if he played another game after Georgia Tech, he would have lost his eligibility for next year. And so it's understandable, hey, if he wants to go to the NFL as a quarterback, he needed more on tape to prove that, whereas Hurts had another had another year of eligibility after this year. And so it will be really interesting. Will, have you heard anything of like where he might go or speculation?
I'm not pretending to be an insider by any means. I saw on ESPN where he visited Maryland last night, and I saw where Miami's another option, and I've heard Oklahoma as well.
Yeah.
So any of these teams who maybe are on the cusp of making the playoff, not saying that Miami and Maryland are, but teams like Oklahoma, of course with Kyler Murray, who's going to be the big topic of our conversation today, with him leaving no matter what, whether they go to the Major League Baseball or to go to the NFL draft,
right?
He's gone after this year, so he's played his last game as a Sooner. So if Jalen were to somehow go to Oklahoma to bridge between Kyler and Spencer Rattler, who they have coming in this year, who's probably the top quarterback in high school right now coming out, that could be very interesting because he could have a very good chance of playing against Alabama next year in the playoff as well, which would be very exciting to see.
That would be a big matchup. I mean, I can just picture right now a 4-1 matchup with Oklahoma and him getting and just playing his like lights off best game or getting stuffed because they know exactly what he's able to do.
Exactly.
So that'll be really interesting to see. I think it could be really cool. Oklahoma. It is interesting though because his style of his strength is not what traditionally in the past recent years of what Oklahoma quarterbacks have been. He's very mobile, which other ones have been, but their arms talent has been a lot better and more accurate versus what Hurts can bring. And so it'll be interesting to see, I think. And then Fields, as some of you might know, is going to Ohio State, which all that is interesting because with Haskins going pro after just the 1 year, I mean, it was a pretty epic year. I think he had like 50 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was something ridiculous.
It's something ridiculous, which is like it's hard to pass it up. And then especially with Herbert coming back to Oregon, it makes the top quarterback being taken very open. So it would make sense why Haskins would want to go and get paid,
correct,
as the kids say. And so I feel like there's a wide open range of what the quarterback play will look like next year. I mean, because we have we'll have the two talents of which will be the talk all summer, and then I think in the next year of Lawrence and Tua, which is understandable because they're these young guys who we just watched in the championship game. But then we also have the other guys. Like we haven't. I think the fun part about Fields is that he was just as coveted and sought after as Lawrence was, but we have not seen nearly as much. So he's like this mystery man. As a joke in college, we used to want to say that's how we wanted a girl to describe us. Is we want to be mysterious because like they're intrigued, but they want to see more. That's how I feel about Justin Fields. So we'll see. I think him in the Ohio State offense, I think will fit him pretty well. And I think with Ryan Day now as the coach, there's a lot of. I think that they'll play a lot better next year. I think there is a huge weight over the team this year, and I think if he can get the requests to play next year, which all seems like it will, because with Tate Martell then leaving, it makes it seem like, and he was pretty confident he was going to play, and then all of a sudden he leaves, makes it seem like Fields can play right away. So
that's what I'm thinking.
That's what you're thinking too.
And then Ryan Day is going to make sure that offense brings out the best of Fields.
Yeah.
So the last thing we see of Fields and our memory of Fields won't be that terrible fake punt call in the SEC championship game.
I'm still amazed at.
Almost as bad as the fake field goal attempt that Alabama had in the playoff championship game, which was worse somehow than the fake punt.
I know, which was like, it just a few weeks ago, we like, how do you have a worse call like that? But
and Nick Saban somehow, in a very un-Nick Saban characteristic way, found a way to top Kirby and his fake special teams play.
And on a side note, that's what makes those calls so interesting, is because if that fake field goal somehow works, Alabama comes back, even makes it respectable. We're talking about the brilliance of Saban and like the gutsy and the moxie and all those fun phrases we like to say on.
It's crazy how one decision and the outcome of it, that's not even in your hands as a coach. It's in the hands of your players. Can deem your reputation.
Right, and Saban has, over the past few years, had a play like that. to help his team come back and win in a do or die type of game.
And you could tell Clemson knew it was coming, though, because they had, I think, 7 people standing behind the line of scrimmage.
They were in, it was like, what was it, 4th and 6 on like the 30-yard line. So it wasn't like a long field goal. It was a medium-sized field goal for like a college kicker. If you would trust him to make the field goal. And we had we were in field goal safe, had like 7 guys back ready to go. And they had they faked it to the kicker, and the kicker just ran forward as the lead blocker for then the punter to then holder to then go and run. So
you must not know about Bama kickers. Bama kickers are notorious for being awful.
They are, which is
buddy,
amazing.
Right. As good as the teams are, the kickers are awful. I've got a buddy who I went to seminary with who graduated from Alabama, and he was with us there at seminary, and he told us about the history of Bama kickers. And it's something that I've noticed since then, and how they're not that great. But apparently they have a good one coming in next year. So we'll see. We'll see how kicking freshman Bama player does next year.
Yeah. It is amazing in football how that all can come down to a guy with that one specialty. And I guess they just don't want to spend a scholarship on it, but maybe look into it more. Okay. So that's kind of the landscape now. It'll be interesting. Herbert will come back as a senior at Oregon. You've got all these guys coming in. Who would you think is your hot if you were going to guess right now, how would you rank who's potential for winning the Heisman?
For winning the Heisman next year.
Or being in the conversation. I would say who's your top 3 to 5?
I'd say the top 3 you just named. So, Herbert, Lawrence, Tua.
Okay.
Those are going to be your top 3. Probably not in that order. Lawrence is probably the top option after his championship performance. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Tua and Herbert are going to be up there at least to start the season.
Sure.
Fields, if he can play, which we're assuming he is, he's going to be up there. Whichever quarterback starts for Oklahoma, you have to put in the top 5.
They've won the past 2 years. So it's automatically whoever's playing quarterback.
So if it ends up being Hurts, that could be very interesting. If he's the one who ends up being the man to get the call at Oklahoma, I don't know if he can win the Heisman per se, but he may be in position to lead that team to make a really good run. That's all I can think of right this second, the big names to look out for. But I'm sure as we get into the season, there's going to be some surprises that pop up, kind of like Lamar Jackson did several years ago.
Right.
Coming into this season, people knew he was good, but the way he came out and dominated, they kind of turned heads.
Right, and that's the nature of the Heisman is that they make these boards, and then there's always somebody who comes out we weren't really talking about, and then they become part of the conversation of who's really going to win. And it's usually a quarterback, so I don't know. I would say Tua, Lawrence. Lawrence is probably number 1 right now just because that's the recency of it. Tua will play better, and he'll be put just as high. So it'll be very interesting to see. And I think if Herbert, if Oregon can play better, I think he's got the talent and the offense to fit in of what he does. The problem is that their defense hasn't been good to keep them in games, and even though it is one person, it is also a representative team award of how well the team does. You can't have there's not usually a 4 or 5 loss team, their quarterback or running back to win. So it'll be very interesting to see. It's a very long way off, but it's exciting. I'm already excited for next year. I'm excited for August. So we're gonna the big thing we wanted to talk about was Kyler Murray, kind of the hot topic of being this 2-sport athlete who is so good at both of them. He got drafted in the first round. He got drafted 9th overall this past summer, I believe, 9th overall to the Oakland A's at a signing bonus or his contract is $4,761,000 for playing in the first round. And so going in the first round. And so now, and that was kind of the assumption that he was going to play the 1 year as the quarterback for Oklahoma, and then he was going to go pro in baseball, which seemed like a very straightforward thing to do. It was almost kind of they trust him enough not to get hurt. He'll be a good transfer from Baker Mayfield, and then he'll play well, and then Oklahoma will find somebody else, and they'll go to baseball and ride off into the sunset. And then he goes and wins the Heisman, takes Oklahoma back to the playoff. And even though they had a terrible first quarter, brought them back to being a respectable game. I just want to run through the numbers really quick. He went 260 for 377 passes, threw for almost 70% completion, which is pretty good, threw for 4,300 yards, averaged about 11.6 yards per attempt. So he's averaging throwing past the first down per attempt, which is pretty incredible. I think it looked like it was one of the highest, if not the highest in the country. Threw for 42 touchdowns, which is a lot, and only 7 picks. And so in a season where he played, 14 games, he had averaged half a pick a game. As a first-year starter, he basically didn't get any playing time the past couple of years. So that's him in that. And then baseball last year, he hit 296, almost hit 300, which is really good. 13 doubles, 10 home runs, 47 RBIs, hit 556 slugging, which is really good, and had an on-base percentage of basically 400. So those are really good baseball stats. And so that's kind of where he is right now, and he's projected to be another first round in the NFL as well. And this is hasn't been seen since the likes of a Bo Jackson. Probably have we seen a guy been this talented in both sports. So, Will, if you were Kyler, what would you do?
That is the question, isn't it? A quick tidbit on Kyler before I kind of jump into going through my pros and cons list on it. I saw Kyler play as a freshman when he was at Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. He played again against my Gamecocks, and he was unstoppable running. His passing wasn't developed yet,
right?
But he ran all over us,
right?
I think he ran for over 100 yards that game.
Wow!
And it was his first start after Kyle Allen had got benched. It was his first start,
right?
And it came against us, and like I said, he dominated. So when I saw where he was transferring to Oklahoma, I was happy then too. I was like, okay, done with Kyler. But yeah, so what should Kyler do? I kind of want to go down a few pros and cons, and then we can talk them out and kind of get your thoughts on them too. First of all, with football, what are the big pros for football? I think the main thing with football is that if you go pro in football and you are a quarterback and you get drafted in the first round, you are an instant star. There are 32 of those guys in the world, starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And then every first-round draft pick as a quarterback is expected by their fan base to be their starter. Right. From day one. It doesn't always happen. We saw this past year with Lamar. He came for Flacco towards the end. It took Tyrod getting hurt for Baker to get the field. Sure. But in your fan base's eyes, if you're drafted in the first round as a quarterback, you are their starting quarterback and you are an instant star.
It's not an if, it's a win in the first year. Yeah.
Exactly. So instant stardom for that. Also, football is just a sexier sport than baseball.
As a baseball fan, you have to admit that football is the sexier one.
Baseball is America's pastime, but football is America's playtime. So football is king right now. So if you get a chance to play football or baseball, if you're equally talented in both, football's the sexier sport, more notoriety, more coverage, more face time through that. Also in football, there's a quicker earning potential. So as a first-round draft pick in the NFL, I think you got some numbers on what Lamar and Baker got last year.
Just as a reference, so Baker Mayfield went first overall to the Cleveland Browns. He signed a 4-year, $32.68 million contract with a $21.85 signing bonus. So then basically not all that money is guaranteed. The signing bonus is, but the rest of that is up there. And then Lamar Jackson, who I believe was he the last? I think he was very late.
Very late. I can't remember. I know that they traded up to get him.
Yeah. I want to say it was in the 30s. But anyway, as a late first rounder, and also in football, all the first rounders are 4-year contracts, it looks like, now with the new player agreement. And so his is 4-year, $9.47 million with a $4.97 guaranteed signing bonus. And then again, his baseball contract with the Oakland A's is $4.76 million, but all that is guaranteed. Right. And so that's kind of just as a basis.
Right. So yeah, with football and the quicker earning potential, as you can see, both of those numbers, even though they're not guaranteed, are higher numbers than his contract as the
Sure.
number 9 overall pick in baseball. I think he was.
number 9.
So just off the bat, right there, and those contracts, like I said, or like Nick said, they're 4-year deals, 5th-year options. You're on your second contract by the time you're 26, 27 years old.
Sure.
Whereas in baseball now, and we saw it with my Braves and Ronald Acuna this year, you play, and then once you hit a certain amount of time, you become arbitration eligible. Mm-hmm. After your arbitration years, you hit free agency. So we saw with Bryce and Machado this year, they're really young to be free agents, and they're both 26, 27 years old.
Yeah.
The average player hits free agent in baseball 29 or 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And the way, as we can see in this offseason in baseball, teams are much more hesitant now to hand out those massive long-term contracts.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of 1-2 year deals, not even many 3-year deals.
Even in just the past year.
Exactly.
I remember a guy like for baseball fans, a Mike Moustakas, who like became a free agent because that's what you're told to do as your agent, and then he had to sign for a lot less money, just because of the way that now with all the numbers in baseball, they're really pushing for teams to have these smaller contracts because you have a guy like Giancarlo Stanton who has a 10-year, $300 million contract. That's a lot of money, even for as good of a player he is, to put on one guy.
Right. So you're seeing a lot of the free agent contracts where in baseball they used to be there, they're kind of going away. GMs are getting smarter. They're wanting to kind of build from the draft, from the younger guys on their arbitration and pre-arbitration contracts, mm-hmm. and trying to win that way. And
Sure.
then finding fill-in guys to piece
Right.
the rest of your roster holes. So yeah, with football, there's quick earning potential because if you're a quarterback and you are a top 10 quarterback, you're getting paid whenever you're 25, 26 years old. Your
Yes.
second contract is going to be massive because in the NFL, too, a lot of the good teams you see now, like Russell Wilson in his beginning, and then the Rams now are both examples. Wilson was on his rookie contract making hardly nothing. Goff currently on his rookie contract, not making much. You can pay other people around these quarterbacks to win. Mm-hmm. But all these quarterbacks, if they're good enough, they're getting that contract, their second contract, third contract, and they're making money. Mm-hmm. So those are my 3 really big pros for football. Do you have anything else that you think of as a big pro for football?
It's a big pro. I think there's also, like you said back in the beginning, you get more notoriety, I think, as a quarterback, too, as your fan base. I think even just from, like, endorsements, I think that's another factor of that. That's been a struggle in baseball right now, where the commissioner and Mike Trout, who's arguably probably the best player in baseball right now, and that he's not making enough or not doing enough to promote the game. I think baseball's trying to figure out how do we promote these guys better and sign endorsements, whereas in football in the NBA, it's a lot easier for their stars to sign other contracts as well. So for a guy not coming from a whole lot or just coming from average means, then sign this $1 million contracts and then immediately probably have some kind of an endorsement or two, that's a lot very fast. So
Right.
If a big goal is money, then I think football is a big immediate way to go. I think the hard part with football is that not all of that is guaranteed. And to say if he gets hurt, there's a lot of other things of like, will he actually get all the rest of his money and he'll just kind of be a one and done type of thing if he just ends up becoming a backup. And I think that's the hard part with Murray is that the best thing, his greatest abilities are running, be able to do RPOs with his arm. And so, and we've seen that those guys can go really well, but then a running quarterback, the shelf life is just a lot smaller than like a sitting back. You know, it's different than what Drew Brees or Tom Brady are really good at. And not that Kyler can't keep continuing to develop his arm. We even see like a guy like a Cam Newton who is really good, but his MVP season is now becoming more of an outlier versus like the norm of who he is. And so I think it's just factors of that as well. But I guess not to steal your thunder, but you go into I guess you have some cons of football as well.
Biggest con, you kind of hit on just now, is that it's the more dangerous sport.
Sure.
Especially for Kyler. I think he's 5'11", 210, 215. So he's not a big 6'3", 6'4", 230, 240 pound quarterback, like it's kind of your prototypical quarterback now. He's a smaller guy. And if Cam Newton, who in college was literally Superman, running over defensive linemen, linebackers, outrunning safeties, doing all that stuff, and then in the NFL, I've seen people tackle him one-on-one many, many times. In college, you didn't see that. Whenever we drafted, I say we because I'm a Panthers fan. Whenever we drafted Cam, I was like, man, no one's going to be able to tackle this guy. Because I was in the building whenever he beat South Carolina in the SEC Championship.
Right, yeah.
And I witnessed it firsthand. I hated him. I love him now. But I saw it then, and I was thinking, man, no one's going to be able to tackle this guy. Like, it's going to take 3 or 4 guys to tackle him. And then he's going down one-on-one in the NFL. So in the NFL, Kyler will not be the fastest guy on the field. People will be able to catch him. Defensive linemen that are 350 pounds. If that comes down on your throwing shoulder, that's not good.
Right.
So definitely the more dangerous sport. Another big con with football is the enormous amount of pressure that's put on your shoulders. So as I said earlier, with being a first-round quarterback, you're expected to start from day one by your fan base. If you do start from day one, you're also expected to be the man because we spent a first-round pick on you. So there's a ton of pressure on your shoulders to perform as a first-round quarterback.
Right.
And we've seen it work plenty of times. We've also seen it not work plenty of times. Jamarcus Russell's the first one that comes to mind.
Right.
Of where he had all this potential. He was drafted very early by the Raiders, maybe first overall.
I think he was
can't remember.
first overall, yeah.
And probably the biggest bust of all time in the draft.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
So it's a ton of pressure on your shoulders.
Sure, and more than likely, with the talent that he has, he's going to go to a top 10 team as well. And the reason they're in the top 10 is because they weren't very good.
Exactly.
So it's not a team that has all this nucleus around him like a Jared Goff, right now, where he has all this talent around him and it's not as much of a pressure on him. If he was to go to a team like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of who might be a good example. Like, even just take the Bills. Like, not very good, can't protect, their quarterback right now, Josh Allen. Now, he's able to make some plays, but it's not like, it's just a lot of hits on a young quarterback. And like we said, Kyler doesn't have the biggest frame to where you would want him to get a bunch of hits.
And side note on Josh Allen, he had a sneaky good year this year as a fantasy player. So I hope none of my fantasy guys are listening, but he is on my draft board for quarterback this year in the late rounds.
Okay, yeah. So, he was surprisingly a really good running quarterback, which I was really impressed.
Right, he ran for like a touchdown. It seemed like almost every game at least.
Right.
And with the Bills, they're going to get him some help at the skill positions. So the Bills may be on the comeback. I'm not sure. I guess we'll kind of see what happens with Brady and the rest of the AFC East.
I know it's hard. It's hard to be another team until Brady retires. I think they're all going to throw like a celebration party once he officially retires.
I'm pretty sure Brady's a robot, so I don't know if he's ever going to retire. They'll just recharge his batteries and send him back out there.
Right? Yeah, they'll just keep putting him out there.
Oh yeah. All right. Any other thing for you on cons? Those were kind of my big ones for football.
I think those are the big cons. I think there's also just a con of it's just a lot of hits on your body. And I think you just have to know in football, the more we're learning about concussions, the more we're learning about all those things, even just the brain damage it does, and even just learning the toll it takes on your body. I think we know, but even just seeing guys as they get older, to know that when you sign up to play football in the NFL, you're gonna get hit, you're gonna get hurt, and they're just long-term life ramifications of like, even if you're okay, you're just going to have some ailments, something, probably for the rest of your life. And so it's just a matter of like, if you're okay. And not that you can't get hurt in baseball. There have been very, very serious injuries, but it's just different because you are asking your body to to go out there and perform and take hits. And so I think it's just a factor of what you're really passionate about, of what it really, I think that's the big part behind all this. Is what are you really passionate about? I think is really a key to it. But that's probably the big other thought with that. So,
Right. So you want to move on to baseball then?
let's do it.
All right, some pros for baseball. Piggybacking off the biggest con for football of it being dangerous, one of the biggest pros for baseball is that it's safer. In baseball, you're going to get hurt. Everyone gets hurt in baseball. You pull a hammy, you have a sore shoulder, sore elbow. Since he's not a pitcher, the odds of getting Tommy John are pretty low. Although it does happen to some outfielders, which he would play. But overall,
you think you would play outfield probably more than shortstop?
That's what I've read. Is that he's viewed more as an outfielder.
As an outfielder, that makes
that
sense.
way, with his speed, he can cover a lot of ground.
That's sure. Even just as like a center fielder or a left fielder, it makes sense. Okay.
And he's got a good size for the outfield, 5'11", so he's pretty thick. He's small for a football player, but he's pretty thick for a baseball outfielder.
Yeah.
So it's a much safer sport to play, even though you play more games. You play probably at an older age too, which I'll get into next actually. It's a much safer sport to play. Which leads to my second one, which there's a longer term earning potential. So with football, you have a quicker earning potential, but with baseball, it's a more longer term.
Right.
Although it kind of piggybacks off too that what I said about recently, the trend of not overpaying players in baseball and free agency. But as a baseball player, you do have a good chance to make a lot of money later on in your career. In football, if you're a first round pick, you play that contract. If you're good enough, you'll make money your second contract. If you bust, that's probably it. You may get a chance to back up somewhere, but you don't see a ton of first-round guys who came in that were looked at to be the man as backups. You don't see that. They're either superstars or they're out. So that's kind of your two options with that. I mean, there are a couple guys, Bridgewater, of course, but with his injury, I mean, they kind of made him an exception.
Sure.
But with baseball, so there's a chance that once you play out your first contract, make all that guaranteed money, go through arbitration. If you're good enough, you can make a lot of money in arbitration.
Sure.
And then hit free agency as a 20, 28, 29-year-old. Even if it's just a 1 or 2 year deal, they're paying a lot of money for 1 or 2 year deals. The Braves paid Josh Donaldson $23 million on a 1 year deal.
It's pretty good.
Is the highest. I think it's the highest 1 year deal in Major League Baseball history.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that, and that's all guaranteed. So the earning potential, while it's not as fast in baseball, there's a chance to make more money in baseball.
Sure, and then also the average career is longer too in baseball. I mean, when we talk about guys, if they play quarterback for a decade, we look at them as that being a success. Where in baseball, you very easily see guys who played for 15 years, and they're not necessarily even a star, but they can just make they just are a good all-around good player.
Right.
So it's definitely longer. Did you have any more pros for baseball? Okay.
Potentially the biggest pro for baseball, on top of it being safer and there's a greater longer term earning potential, is that the money that you sign for is all guaranteed. So if you sign for $12 million for a 1 year deal, you're getting $12 million.
Right.
If you're Giancarlo Stanton and 3 or 4 years ago you signed for 10 years and $325 million, you're getting all $325 million. So if you're looking to make money, which I'm sure Kyler is, all that money you signed for in baseball is guaranteed. You're getting it no matter what, whether you're great, whether you're not great, whether you're healthy, whether you're hurt, whether you're in a slump at the plate, whether you're an all-star.
Right.
You're making that money.
Yeah. I mean, they even have the I'm blanking on the name, but the guy from the Mets from back in the 90s.
Bobby
Bonilla, where he signed it was like a lifetime contract.
Pretty much.
Where
he gets paid $1 million a year until, I don't know, but
I think it's like it's a 25-year contract, and it's very they were trying to save up more money at the time, and now they're
Right.
still paying him $1 million every year.
At some point, either last year or year before last, when the Mets were really bad, which, I mean, they're the Mets, he was their highest paid outfielder.
That's pretty amazing.
He made more money, and he retired 15, 20, however long ago it was.
Mm-hmm.
And he made more money that year than any other outfielder on the New York Mets.
That's pretty amazing.
Yes.
So it's a fun little tidbit. I think it's like July. I want to say July 1st. They call it Bobby Bonilla Day.
Bobby Bonilla Day.
When they reshare the story every year.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, let's
All
keep
right.
going.
Let's move on to the cons. In baseball, there is no guarantee that you will ever make the major leagues,
Right.
even as a first-round pick. We've seen countless examples of first-round picks who never even see the big leagues. There's a ton of potential when they were first drafted, but either they make the big leagues and they're just average, or they don't make it at all. Mm-hmm. If you sign like Kyler Murray did, so he's 21 years old now.
Right, yeah.
So your 100th day in the league, you're probably going to be still in single A rookie ball. By the time you play your 400th game, there's still no guarantee you're in the big leagues. Whereas in football, I mean, you're the starting quarterback,
Right.
at least in your fan base's eyes.
Right, and like we were saying before, it's even more pressure now because even before you have a guy like an Aaron Rodgers who came in as the heir to Brett Favre, and Aaron Rodgers was very talented, but he sat behind for I want to say 3 years or something, something like that, where it was a significant amount of time. And now you have a guy like a Pat Mahomes from Kansas City, where he sat the first year, and that was and he was like a 3rd round pick.
No, they traded into the top 10 for him.
They tried a top 10. That's my mistake. Anyway, him just not playing for that first year was even surprising. And so now there's just even more pressure on these teams to switch it up, or even a team like the Ravens who put in Lamar Jackson as a pressure because their team was potentially going to make the playoffs, which they did.
And you could argue that he's the reason they made the playoffs.
Right. And he has a talent, but he's still unpolished as a thrower.
As you could see in the first round
As
of
you
the
can see in the
playoffs.
first round of the playoff. So, so there's just a lot of there's not a guarantee in baseball.
Right.
And I think a con with that, too, is you have to be patient because even though you're being paid as a millionaire, your lifestyle doesn't change right away. You're still riding
buses
on AA like everybody else. And being with the team, which is cool, but you're right. You're going in these small towns, playing every day away from your family, for like maybe a couple thousand people, and so it's a reality of being patient and waiting to get your turn, and not everyone gets to play. Now, as a first rounder, making a few $1 million, they're going to give you every opportunity to succeed.
maybe more than you deserve at times.
Maybe more, just to say that they gave you the best shot they could.
Right.
So there's definitely a very good shot. It's not like a guarantee, like a small percentage. It's a very good shot. But, I mean, like we're saying, even a guy like a Chris Bryant, he's one of the top stars. He took a couple years in the minors. They even kept him in the minors a little bit his rookie year to like make him last longer in arbitration, like we were talking about. So there's just other factors of you just have to be patient. And as a guy, when you've been dreaming about this your whole life, it's very easy to see as football as the shiny new toy, or do you wait in baseball for a couple more years for something potentially more stable? But it's not guaranteed right away.
Right. All right, and then my last con, I'm going to kind of draw an illustration. So your wife, Noelle, does she know much about baseball?
She knows some. She can probably tell you like what a single is or a double or like what a hit is, but a lot of it's just like what I would explain to her. Like a double, I think I just taught her what a double play was this past year. You know, like I would have walked it through with her.
So can she name 5 Major League Baseball players without you coaching her?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I think there's a potential she could, but it would be a lot harder than say like football.
So she could name 5 quarterbacks without you coaching, or even 5 players.
Probably 5 players. She also went to South Carolina. So she could probably name a few. It would be easier, that's for sure.
So that leads to my last point of there's not much star potential in baseball. So you could argue that the biggest star in baseball right now is Bryce Harper. Mm-hmm. I remember because he's a couple years younger than me, and we share a last name, no relation. If we are, Bryce, send some money. So I remember reading about him whenever he must have been like a sophomore in high school when I was a senior.
Okay.
And he was in like Sports Illustrated or ESPN the magazine, something, and they dubbed him the LeBron James of baseball as a 15, 16-year-old kid. And for the most part, he's lived up to it. He was MVP as a 23-year-old. Although the Nationals never made it out of the divisional series the time that he was there, and of course he may still go back now. Hasn't signed yet. You can argue that he's the biggest star in baseball. I'd say pretty much all sports fans know who he is, but there are casual people like Noelle. She could possibly know who Bryce Harper is if she saw him. Behind him, I don't know that baseball has a transcendent star right now, whereas they have in the past. They've had some transcendent stars.
Sure.
Mike Trout, as you said, is probably the best player. Mookie Betts is up there. He's one of the best players. Max Scherzer is probably the best pitcher.
Scherzer, Kershaw maybe, but even those guys are not. There's not like a really like vibrant personality star.
Right.
These guys are stars, but they're quieter.
Right. So with baseball, there's a limited star potential right now, at least, with these guys. If you're a starting quarterback in the NFL, you're automatically a star.
Right.
People outside of your fan base know who you are. In baseball, we as the Braves have a kid named Ronald Acuna Jr., which I know you know who he is because you're a baseball guy like me.
Right.
The baseball world kind of knows who he is, but he's a 20-year-old guy from Venezuela who has kind of taken the baseball world by storm this past year. So he has star potential, but I don't know if he's the transcendent star that can bring baseball up in the United States. Overseas in Venezuela, he'll be massive there because he's a homegrown star from Venezuela.
Right. And
everyone's going to know who he is.
And those players from those countries, like their countries are so supportive of them.
They're basically heroes.
Right. Like David Ortiz in the Dominican Republic. It's like he's a superstar there. They love him. And it's really cool. But in America, there's so many other – that's just not our top sport.
Right.
As much as it pains me to say that. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that may be the biggest con is baseball, that for Kyler, the most popular he could ever be if he chooses baseball is right now. This could be the peak of his stardom. As a Heisman-winning quarterback. So that's kind of the biggest con.
And that's the ironic part, is his biggest stardom would be from football.
Exactly.
As a baseball player. And so that's the big question now. I mean, we're kind of circling back. It seems what it's coming down to, it's really, I mean, like this is going to be in the beginning, it's a personal life decision to where what's the most important thing for you? What is your true passion? Because I think as fans, we can forget how much time and effort and energy it does to put into each of these games. It's different. Football is a grind, 60 minutes, we're hitting each other, leave it all on the field every week. They play only 16 games, but those are like that's a lot of games, and a lot of hits. And baseball is a different kind of grind where you're getting up every day and playing the same over and over again, battling through stuff on the road a lot, so you're away from your family a lot, and so there's a lot of training that has to go into all this. So it's really whatever you'd rather do. I do have another question for you. Do you think he could be the next Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders to try to play both sports? Do you think that's a real possibility, or is it just more of a fun thing as we fans talk about?
I think that he has the best potential to do it of anyone since Dion. Because when you think of Dion, you think of football and being a cornerback.
Right.
But he was also a pretty good outfielder for the Rays.
Yeah.
He could play.
Yeah.
But I don't think that is something that he should try to do, just because everything now, and I don't know how sports were when Bo Jackson played. I don't know kind of the grind of how much time you put in, but it seems like now both those sports are full-time year-round jobs. In baseball, you report to spring training in February.
Mm-hmm.
And then, at least in the pros, your season ends in September. And then if you make the postseason, October. Mm-hmm. So you only have 3 months off all year. And in that off time, you're training. And you're getting in shape for next year.
Right. You're not resting. You're just sitting on the couch the whole time.
Right. And then with football, you start training camp in July. And then your regular season ends in December. And then the playoffs are January and the Super Bowl's in February. And then it starts back up. So there's only, 5 months where there's no games? Mm-hmm. So, and everything overlaps. In July, what do? Do you play with your Major League Baseball team, if you are fortunate enough to make it, and miss out on all that time as the quarterback?
I think that's
team?
That's the big factor is the position he's trying to play.
Exactly. If he was going to be a receiver or a corner or a safety, kind of like what Dion was, running back like Bo Jackson was, it's different. But as the quarterback, you are the leader of that team. You are the face of that franchise.
Right. As a first-round pick, it's like you're the guy.
Exactly. So it wouldn't work. There's no way it would work.
And I think even just mastering the playbook and leading the offense and getting familiar with the guys, like I think what Bo Jackson was able to do is he was just so talented. And they kind of messed up his eligibility, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so he refused to play with them. And then he got drafted by Kansas City Royals and played outfield for them, and then got drafted by the Raiders because he was still on the board in a different kind of draft. And so then he was able just to plug and play as a running back. He was basically just hit the hole, do your thing, and he was so talented he could do that. But yeah, with Murray, it is different, and I think that's a huge factor of him trying to play quarterback as the leader for him to either miss a lot of time in baseball. Or you're missing like training camp, which is where all these guys they're learning so much and building camaraderie with the team. I think the hard part is I think it'd be very tough with him and his teammates on both sides. I think that he would have some hard time. Like there might be some animosity towards him. I think it's even just little factors like that. Right. So it'd be really fun to see, but I think there's a lot of factors I think that make it really hard.
So if the Raiders were still in Oakland. Because, of course, they're leaving to go to Vegas.
Right.
If the Raiders were still in Oakland, and let's say that he decides to play both, and he would be drafted by the Raiders, they'd somehow work it out. Hypothetically, it would work. He'd get drafted by the Raiders. So Derek Carr, let's say, starts this year. Not a problem this year. He's able to manage his time, playing minor league ball for the A's, backup quarterback for the Raiders. But during his minor league stay, he ascends. So he's everything we thought he was and better in baseball. He ascends, and he's up in AAA end of the year. So let's fast forward to 2021. Carr's gone. They decide that Kyler's the guy now. They've seen enough from him to know that he's their quarterback.
Right.
At the same time, he's the starting center fielder for the Oakland A's. What does he do if the A's are in a playoff push in September when his regular season, and let's say the Raiders, by some miracle, are good by then, and it's supposed to be a good year for the Raiders? What does he do? Do you stay with the A's that are making a playoff push, or do you play quarterback, or do you somehow try to mix it? That's what I don't think
weird.
And
I think there's these weird contract things too. Of say because he signed with Oakland first, he's obligated to them first because he signed the deal with them first, and they have the first rights to him. And so it's either you'd have to do stuff like that where you have the certain rights at certain times. It gets weird. I personally think the most likely way of him playing two sports is that he plays one first retires, and then tries the other one. Kind of like what Tim Tebow did.
He's doing baseball now.
He's doing with baseball now. And so I could see him playing football first, and then say he's 31, tired of, and then just goes for baseball. But there's no guarantee with that either. I think that's probably the best scenario for him playing.
There is currently a National Football League player who is under contract in Major League Baseball. Do you know who it is?
I do know who it is. Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson, that's right. And I saw the other day where he said he is going to report to Yankees camp.
He keeps
pretty
reporting.
much for a PR thing. I'm sure that's what it is.
I think it's what it is. Because he actually was drafted by the Rangers, I think, and his rights got traded.
Yeah.
In a very PR move. So it'd be interesting. I would enjoy him trying to play baseball. Because I remember seeing him in person because he went to NC State. And as a Clemson fan, used to watch him some too. And he can play. He was a good defensive second baseman. He could hit. The harder thing, I think, is that they're two totally separate sports. It's two totally separate skills, and him coming back to try to hit, I think, is the hardest thing.
Right.
Hitting a baseball is like one of the toughest things to do, and when you haven't been doing it, because like you're saying, if you're playing it for a year round, football, you're not swinging a bat. It's totally different, and trying to get that coordination back, or to just even get used to it, it's just a lot different than, say, if he was a pitcher. Kyler Murray was a pitcher. So, yeah, it'd be fun. I would personally enjoy seeing two. I think it's really fun, but they're so specialized now, and there's so much money on the line too, where it's like really hard to. And also seeing that Bo Jackson got hurt playing football, and then it messed up his baseball career. So I think just teams are so protective of their assets too.
So it all leads to, if you were Kyler Murray, what would you do?
If I were Kyler Murray, I would probably choose baseball. But then again, like for me, I like the steadiness of baseball more. You're still made $5 million. And also the thing is too, if it doesn't work out in baseball, say you just can't hit anymore. You're 3 years down the road, you could go be a quarterback in the NFL and still make some money if you really wanted to. I think it's harder for me, I would feel like it'd be harder to switch from football to baseball than baseball to football. That's just me. I don't know. But also, I like the steadiness of baseball, of that. It's a longer earning potential. It's a longer career. It's less hits on the body. And I think that it's a longer thing. And I think it's also a way of, like, in the NFL, he'd be one star among many stars. Like, it's not like we can name off so many people. He could become the guy in baseball and help make it transcendent. So it's also a matter of, do you want to be, I also view it as like, do you want to be the Alabama star on like a very loaded Alabama team, or do you want to be the guy and make your team ascend to the top too? So for me, I'd probably choose baseball.
Gotcha. So full disclosure, today is Saturday, September. Football season start back. Saturday, January the 12th. And Kyler Murray has not made an official decision, so we do not know at this point what he's doing yet.
No, he threw his name back into the NFL draft. It's kind of the right. I mean, that seems like it's closest.
Right,
as close as we know.
Right. So by the time that you hear this, he will have made his decision, and this will be obsolete. But if I were Kyler Murray, the limelight of football is too much to pass up.
Really?
Yes. So he had every intention of playing baseball. He was a number 9 overall pick. Mm-hmm. And the A's were gracious enough to say, hey, you want to play your football? I mean, we have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. Go do it. And for them, they were thinking, too, like, okay, we're getting the star. So he's going back to football. He's going to be quarterback, take over Baker Mayfield. People are going to know who he is. Mm-hmm. It's going to boost our ticket sales in his minor league games. It's going to have the Tebow effect. That's when Tebow was going up through the Mets and all his games. Tebow played in Columbia, just down the road from here.
Right, Fireflies.
And the Fireflies sold out all the time.
I went one. It was amazing. Yeah.
So he would have that effect on their minor league teams. So whenever they're playing single A games in the middle of nowhere, people would want to come to see Kyler. Mm-hmm. So for the A's, it was a great move. But then he blew up, and he became the player and the star that he has this year.
Right.
So if you have a chance to be a first-round quarterback in a world now in America where the NFL is king and these quarterbacks are instant stars that everyone knows their name. You're going to make this money, although it's not guaranteed. Still a lot of money to set up you and your family for the rest of your life.
Right.
It's too much to pass up for him.
Yeah.
He's got to go to the NFL draft.
Yeah.
It's got to happen.
Yeah. Do you think he's able to go to the NFL draft and then pick which one after that to see he's better? Or do you think does he have to declare one? Like, does he have to declare he's going to the NFL to then be in the NFL draft? I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, so if he declares himself for the draft, the A's are going to ask him to pay back his signing bonus. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to do what the Braves did this year and file a grievance to try to get compensation and another draft pick in this next year's draft or however it works to be able to make up for that pick.
Sure.
So with the Braves last year, whenever they drafted Carter Stewart, high school pitcher, he was hurt, and apparently they weren't aware of it. Mm-hmm. Carter Stewart filed a grievance because he never signed in time with the Braves because the Braves offered him less money than he was wanting. Filed a grievance, but the Braves actually won it. So the Braves are going to get, I think, the number 9 pick in this year's draft. Mm-hmm. And Carter Stewart's going to go to junior college and try to come back in next year. He wanted to originally be a free agent, but I think that they're going to make him go and be in the draft again.
Okay.
So the A's are going to make him pay back his signing bonus. So his first NFL contract won't look as pretty as it looks on paper because over $4 million of that is going back to the A's.
Right. Basically, his signing. If he was Lamar Jackson, his whole signing bonus would go back.
Exactly.
But if we think he's going where we think he's going in the top 10, that could be like a fourth of his signing bonus.
Exactly.
So it is still a lot of money.
Right. So yeah, I think he's playing football.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would not be that mad if the Panthers drafted him.
it would be pretty fun if the Panthers drafted him. And for the record, I think he probably will sign football.
Yeah.
Me personally, I would. And that's, again, baseball's been I've loved baseball since I was a kid. So being able to chance to play in the major leagues would be like, that's my dream.
Right.
But all right, for this last part of today's episode, we're going to jump into an article that Will graciously wrote for the website about the SEC. And so, Will, just kind of give the people a little bit of an idea of what you were wanting to dive into with that article.
Yeah, so it's something that I've been thinking about for a while. It's been 5-6 years since there's been any kind of major expansion with conference realignment and things like that. And it's something that I feel like is coming, especially with the playoffs and then the Big Ten being left out this year. They're wanting to get to 8 teams. I feel like there's some change coming in college football, and I think that it could kick off with expansion. So I wrote an article, and I entitled it College Football 2030 SEC. And hopefully if people like it enough, Nick will let me write some more for the other conferences and kind of how I see them playing out too. But in the article, I break down what the SEC I think will look like in 2030. They're going to get to 16 teams. That's going to happen. So they're going to add 2. I'm not going to tell you who they are. Try to get you to read the article. But they're going to break it down so it's not going to be East and West anymore. They're going to split them into 14 pods. And so with each pod, so the way the schedule is going to break down is you play every team in your pod every year. So an example of a pod, without being too spoilery, would be Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. They're a pod in my prediction.
Right.
So they all play each other every single year. Also, you play another pod. So let's say if you're one of those 4 teams, you're also going to play 4 games against another pod. Mm-hmm. And so everybody in your pod plays that pod. And the next year it splits or it switches. So you play another pod the next year, the last pod you haven't played yet. So you play everybody within 3 years.
So instead of it being as it is now, where you have a rival, you play in the other division every year, and then you just rotate the other team.
Right.
So you play every like all the other teams
You
like
would
every
play-
6 years, right, or something like.
Yeah.
It works out something like
The
that.
last time we play Alabama this year at home, 2019, which is not going to be pretty. Last time we played Alabama was 2010 when I was there, and we beat them. So it's been 9 years since we played Alabama. So in this situation, you would get to play every team while you were in college.
Right. Clemson's played Alabama more than South Carolina has,
Exactly.
which is pretty crazy to think about.
Yes. So, of course, with that, you've got to say, okay, well, what about the Georgia-Auburn rivalry? What about the Tennessee-Alabama rivalry? There would also be one permanent cross-divisional rival for each team, not in their pod.
Sure.
And I've got it lined up where each team has that one rival from a different pod they would
Sure.
play every year.
Yeah.
Which kind of begs the question, like, okay, so what if my rival that I'm playing every year is in the pod that we're scheduled to play that year? So in that case, too, each rivalry has like a sister partner rivalry that they would play in those off years. So
Okay.
it kind of, talking about it, doesn't make as much sense as what I actually drew out and wrote up in
Sure.
example.
Sure.
But yeah, essentially you would play every team within 3 years in the conference.
Is the goal but maintaining the rivalries
Right.
that are already in place that you don't want to get rid of. Like you don't want to get rid
Right.
of Alabama, Tennessee. Even though Alabama's been pretty dominant recently. I mean, it's a traditional rival that you want to. That's what makes college
Right.
football so great is that you have those.
Spoiler alert, you've never been able to tweet Tennessee just beat Alabama. That rivalry, Tennessee hasn't won since Twitter was created.
Oh,
So sorry, Tennessee fans, if you're listening.
it's okay. They're probably aware. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yep. So that's kind of the point of it. I go through some teams that would make sense but aren't ultimately the teams. Some teams that, or I should say teams, some schools that would make sense but aren't in. Some teams that possibly could be in but don't make as much sense. Kind of go through the schedules, what it looks like. And so where the teams end up coming from, there's going to be ramifications and how that
sure.
expands to other leagues.
Yeah.
Which is what I said I'll get into in a later article. And the Big Ten won't be far behind the SEC. They may even be in front of them. So that would probably be the next one to come, is what the Big Ten will do as their response or kind of how it plays out from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so check it out. It's something I've been thinking about for a while, like I said. I think it's a pretty fun read.
Yeah. It's a really cool read. It got a lot of interesting thoughts from it. So definitely come and check it out. It's got a lot of interesting ramifications, and I think it'll be really cool to kind of think through of what that could potentially look like in a short amount of years, because we were saying the same thing, 5-7 years ago, and we had all these changes, and now you have like a West Virginia playing in the Big 12 and Missouri playing in the SEC East, which you wouldn't think of that being the possibility, but that's the reality we live in. And so, and especially if we go to an 18 playoff, you could have two conferences decide to join up and make a mega conference. It's like, you know what? We're not getting in, so we're going to do the best we can.
Right.
Or you have other teams like a UCF, like what do they do? Because they're not getting the respect nationally and not playing enough people. So like, do they move into something? And so there's a lot of cool possibilities, but it is like with coaching, when you have someone filling somebody else's spot, then there's another spot that opens and you have to fill it in, and there's a huge ramification
Right.
with all that. So go and check it out on backyardcatch.com. All right. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, Will.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hope some other time we meet up and get to talk some more. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I love that. All right. And as for now, we'll catch you on the flip side.